Namaskaram. As a part of acquiring knowledge, it is very important on the side of a practicing Hindu who is an integral part to Sanatana Dharma to understand what are the basic tenets of other world religions. The first objection that could be raised is, why should I know? If I am a practicing Hindu, if I believe in the scriptures that have been ordained for me to know, for example, the Vedās, the Upanishads or the Vedanta, the Itihasas, namely Srimad Rāmāyanam and Sri Mahābhāratam, Purānās, mainly Srimad Bhagavata, Mahapurana, Sri Vishnu Purana, Varaha Purana and so on, and sutras of Apastamba or Bodhayana, and later the Upangas. What is the need when I have the whole library with me? This is the first objection that could be raised. This is the Purva Paksham. The way I would like to present the Siddhantam is, as much as we would love to internalize, follow and appreciate the tenets of our own religion, it is also pertinent on our side to understand the basics of other world religions. There is no compulsion that we have to research, go and dive very deep into the tenets of other religions. That may not be the purpose, but understanding is important. The second objection, well, you are saying understanding is important. What should we understand of the other religions? There are two aspects to understanding any religion. What is the theology and the philosophy that is being presented by the religion? And second, how different or how similar am I to that religion? Thereby, after this evaluation, understanding the theology and the philosophy of that religion, and understanding the similarities and the differences that I share with that particular religion, the evaluation and the review report will state that these are the flaws in the other religion. This is how evaluation finally ends up in. But to this objection and to this answer, to this Siddhantam, my take would be, I may not be able to cover the critiquing of other world religions in this course. The scope of this course doesn't cover that aspect. I am not saying that aspect is wrong. When we study world religions as a philosophy student and as a theology student, it is our duty, we are duty bound to understand what are the flaws that are generally found or opined by philosophers of that particular religion. But in the scope of this particular course, where it is introduction to world religions, we may not be critiquing the other religions. Nor, when I am not even critiquing, I may not even end up criticizing the other religions. Again, that doesn't fall within the scope of this particular course. Well, you as a Sishya, you can take it up on your side, read more books, listen to more lectures of other religions, probably if you are interested in that particular angle of understanding world religions, and then you may critique that particular religion. That is your fundamental right. But in this course, we will just be covering the basic tenets, a lot of which you may already know of the other religions. So this is the first disclaimer that I am placing. Second disclaimer that I am placing is, while attending this course is completely your choice, you have chosen to procure this course, you have chosen to attend the course. The course comprises of various subjects and various e-lectures to it. Now at the commencement itself, I would like to state that if you are not very comfortable to even listen to the tenets of other world religions, you are free to not attend this particular session. As mentioned at the start, This is just to understand and get acclimatized with other world religions. Why? What is the need? Maybe 200, 300, 1,000 years before, when some of these religions were not even that prominent in the Indian subcontinent, knowing or understanding the other religion was not that easily available or possible to any practicing Hindu. But today, it is not the case. We live in the world where if there is some incident that may concern or that may not concern us happening in Peru, or in Alaska, or in Japan, or in Australia, to a South Indian, any incident that is happening in North India and the vice versa, we immediately get the video of it. Not being shot by the official people, but many people who hold a cell phone in their hands end up shooting. So we get various angles to one particular incident that may just have happened a few minutes before or is still happening now. So in this kind of, I would say, a technologically advanced world, I am not saying advanced in terms of culture or ethos, but at least in terms of technology, we may be put in a situation where we may not even know what that other person is doing, because our understanding of the world religions will be very meager. So to dispel our ignorance on other world religions, I have taken up this daunting task of giving a very brief introduction, a talk on the world religions. So before I get into the 6 world religions that we have shortlisted for this course, let us understand the word Astika. When the word Astika is mentioned, its counterpart Nastika will also come along with it. Asti in Sanskritam means there exists, there is or there exists is Asti. Asti can be used in various connotations, but the general meaning is there is. So this word Asti, when introduced as a noun indicating a person, so a person who believes there is or there exists is called Astika. The word is Asti. When it gets transformed into a person whom we denote, it becomes Astika. The simple opposite antonym of this is, if the person does not believe there is or does not believe that there exists, is a Nastika. So Asti, Nasti, Astika, Nastika. Astika, Nastika, Bhedam. So this is the difference between an Astika and Nastika. Asti, Nasti, Astika, Nastika. In understanding this word, Panini Bhagavan's Ashtadhyayi, Panini's Ashtadhyayi, wherein Panini was a great grammarian, he states, Asti Nasti Dishtam Matihi. So while explaining, he says, Asti Ishvara iti matir yasya. To that mind that believes that there is God. Now there is a slight improvement or another way of understanding the word Asti and Astika. To that one who believes there is or there exists God is Asti Ishvara iti matir yasya is Astika. So similarly we will get Nastika. To that mind which believes that there is no God or there exists no God is Nastika. Further to elaborate on this, we have another grammarian called Hemachandra, who says that these could be the possible definitions that could come under that one umbrella called Astika. So first of all he says, who is an Astika? Nastika bhinna iti Astika. The one who is not an Astika is an Astika. But this is a very simple definition given based on the etymology of the word. But this could have a small aberration in it. Why? Because if Astika is the person who is not an Astika, so he says Nastika bhinna iti Astika, Whoever is not an Astika is an Astika. Today in the current world, you may be coming across people who do not have a general opinion about God. That doesn't mean that they don't believe in God. That also doesn't mean that they believe in God. So they fall in a grey area which is neither white nor black, which doesn't come under one of the poles. It is somewhere between. So such people who do not have a general opinion about the existence of God, they are called as agnostic. So the word agnostic need not be Astika. So his definition that Nastika bhinna iti Astika may not hold completely good. Of course, there is another definition he gives. Ishvara asti iti vadi. This is very similar to how Panini Bhagavan's Ashtadhyayi speaks. Ishvara asti. There is a supreme force. The word force, energy, momentum, velocity, speed, these have not been used by our forefathers. Nevertheless, for the understanding of the current young republic that we have, that force or energy, when a person believes, because if you say the existence of Ishvara, some people will deny. They will say, use the word energy. They are more attached to physics rather than belief. So for such people, when energy exists, when that supreme force exists, when that God exists, then he is an Astika. That one who doesn't, the one who doesn't believe is an Astika. Then he gives another added appendix, an appendix to that definition. Veda pramanyavadi iti Astikaha. The one who believes that Vedas are the mukhya pramanam, they constitute the pramanam, then such a person is called an Astika. So from the initial definition of there is or there exists, there was an improvement to there is God or there exists God. Then it went further to state that the one who believes that Vedas is the final authority. So if we believe that the general definition that there is God and there exists God, then a lot of the world religions will come under this umbrella. Judaism believes there is God. Christianity believes there is God. Sikhism believes there is God. Islam believes that there is God. So these religions will also come, thereby their constituents, their followers worldwide will also come under the umbrella called Astika, right? But if the appendix is added, that the Astika is the one who believes that Vedam is the final authority, then all these world religions will not fall under that umbrella. They may not come under Astika. It doesn't mean they will go to the Nastika category. They will not come under the Astika category. So why I had to explain this was, in the earlier scriptures that we had during the times of Bhagavad Rāmānuja, Vedanta Deshika, or even earlier during Adi Shankara, and during some of the times of the Naiyayikas and the Vaiseshikas, it is stated that Bauddham and Jainam, Buddhism and Jainism are Nastika matams. They are Nastika matams under the belief that they don't believe in the existence of God. Of course, they revere a personality called Buddha. They revere a personality Mahābhārata, Arihanta. But in definition, they don't believe in a concept called God. Ishvara Tattvam Nasti. So they come under the Nastika sects. And the other world religions like Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism may come under Astika category. But if the aphorism of belief in the Vedas is applied, then Sanatana Dharma shall only remain the Astika Matam. So this is the general concept. Now how are we going to divide religions? It is generally divided by the research scholars as Oriental religions and Occidental religions. Oriental religions are those which have largely been formed in the east of this world, beginning from Japan and then coming to the countries like Russia, China, the Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Bhutan, Myanmar, Nepal, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and a few countries in the Central Asia like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. So all this landmass and the religions that have come forth from this landmass become the Eastern religions. They are called Oriental religions. For example, Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, that which is being called today, one, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, largely these are the religions which will fall under that category of Oriental religions. Those that come from the West. Today, in today's context, West generally means the US, Canada and a large part of Europe. But when we constitute and read about the world history, that which is to the West means right from Iran, Iraq, Egypt, a lot of countries in the African continent, and the countries above like Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and a large part of the Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and of course North America and South America, they all constitute the Western part of the world. And religions which have come from that part of the world, largely Judaism, Christianity and Islam, are considered as Western religions or Occidental religions. So we have Oriental religions on one side, Occidental religions on one side. Now we need to understand the theology and the philosophy. For students who have already undergone Bhāratiya Sāra Bodhani level 1, they will be aware. Theology is simple, where you have a personal belief, a deity associated with it. For example, Vaishnavism or Vaishnavam is a theology because Sri Mahavishnu along with Sri Mahalakshmi, the divine couple, in that form or in several other forms like Keshava, Krishna, Rama, they all constitute that sect's belief. So people who believe in that deity and constitute practices and rituals associated like Pancharatra Agama, Vaikhanasa Agama, Prachina Agama, and then propitiate the deity through the verses of Rāmāyana, Sri Mahābhārata, Vishnu Purāna, Bhagavata, Bhagavad Gita, and many parts of the Vedas, that will constitute the theology of Vaishnavism or Vaishnavam. Similarly, replace that with Lord Shiva, that becomes Shaivam or Shaivism. Replace that with Shakti, the female deity, it becomes Shaktam or Shaktism. Then you have got lesser known ways called as Kaumaram, Ganapatyam, Shauram and so on, that propitiate Kartikeya, Ganesha, Lord Surya and so on. That is theology. Then there is a philosophy which is Siddhantam. That philosophy talks about the relationship of this body and the one that resides within, which is the Jivatma, with the Prakriti, with the nature around, and the means of the Jivatma in the Prakritika Shariram to reach Paramatma, whether they are one and the same, whether they are different, whether they can be having a symbiotic relationship, whether they can come with an organic relationship, all that comes under Siddhantam. For example, Adi Shankara propagated and nurtured Nirvisesha Advaitam or Maya Visishta Advaitam. He professed non-dualism, but that was qualified by Maya, the concept of Maya. So, Nirvisesha Advaitam. Then besides him, there are other Advaitas, Kevala Advaita, Shuddha Advaita and so on. Ramanujacharya nurtured and propagated Visishta Advaita. He too propagated Advaita, but that was Guna Visishta Advaita, that which is qualified by the qualities. So Vedanta Deshika, a religious follower, a religious student under him, also propagated the same philosophy, that is called qualified non-dualism. Madhvacharya propagated this philosophy, Siddhantam, called as Dvaita or dualism. And later there were many variations to it given by various other bhaktas like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Bhedam and so on. So this is Siddhantam, philosophy. And largely philosophy will marry a theology. For example, the philosophy of Rāmānuja, which is Visishtadvaita, largely marries the theology of Vaishnavism. But not all followers of Vaishnavism have to adhere to Visishtadvaita. There could be Achintya Bheda Bhedis or Dvaitis, because Madhvacharya also propagated a form of Vaishnavism. So not all Visishtadvaitis are Vaishnavites, largely they are, because there was an Acharya, if I am right, Shrikantha, who came up with a bhashyam which was very similar to that of Rāmānuja, but just that it replaced the personal god of Vishnu with Shiva. So largely, say 99% of the Visishtadvaitis are Vaishnavites, and that 1% of the Visishtadvaitis could be Shaivites. A large section of the Vaishnavites could be Visishtadvaitis, some of them could be Dvaitis, some of them could be Achintya Bheda Bhedis, and so on. So there is always a marrying of the Siddhanta, the theology and philosophy and the theology. So we are not going to go into that depth in understanding these world religions. So we are just going to understand its origin, what are its important tenets, that's all. Now considering the first world religion that we are going to think, this has nothing to do with the chronological order. One, we are going to take Buddhism. Buddhism is very popular. Though it was largely formed in the Indian subcontinent between Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Nepal, it spread in the southern part of India, the western part of India, went up till Afghanistan, Pakistan and some parts of the Central Asian countries, and then also went to the Himalayan region kingdoms, and it also went till the eastern part of the countries which is east of India. So it went till the Tibet, Bhutan, Burma, which is Myanmar, Brahmadesham, and to many parts of the Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and further south we have in Sri Lanka, and it went to large parts of China, Mongolia, and till Japan. So today we have followers just not in India. In India, the population of Buddhists or Buddhism followers is little when compared to the followers of Buddhism in other parts of the Eastern world. So we are going to see the origin and the tenets of Buddhism. Coming to the dating, the life of Buddha is said to coincide with the Achaemenid conquest of the Indus Valley. Indus Valley largely spreads in major areas of Pakistan on both sides of the Indus River, Sindhu River. Some parts of Punjab, lower part of Jammu and Kashmir, goes till Haryana, the current day Delhi, Rajasthan, the upper part of Gujarat, and extends till Baluchistan and some parts of Afghanistan. So this area is meant for the Indus Valley. So in the Achaemenid conquest of the Indus Valley during the rule of Darius the first Darius, which is roughly dated between 516 and 517 BCE. So this occupation of Darius in the Gandhara region, which is the Kandahar of Afghanistan, and Sindh Pradesham, which is largely the Sindh province of Pakistan today, which has Karachi and such major cities. It is mentioned that during that time was the lifetime of Buddha. So we don't have any written exact records to mention about the date of Buddha. Nevertheless, from the middle of the 3rd century BCE, we have several edicts of Ashoka that come between 232 and 269 BCE, mention of Buddha, and particularly Ashoka's Lumbini pillar inscriptions talk about Buddha. And there is one particular Brahmi script which you can see goes like Buddha Shakya Muni, which means Buddha, who is the Rishi or the sage of the Shakyas. So that was a clan. So it is mentioned that he was a leader of that particular clan. There is one minor rock edict number 3 that talks about Dhamma. Dhamma is Dharma. Dhamma is a very colloquial word used for Dharma. And when it talks about Dhamma, it means that it comes from the Mauryan era, during which this language largely was flourishing. And later came the very commonly spoken language called Pali, which is akin to another language called Prakritam. Now, Shakya Muni is mentioned even in the reliefs and the evidences found at Bharut, which is dated to 100 BC. So, from the middle of the 2nd and the 3rd century till the 1st century BCE, we have the mention of Buddha, which means that he could have lived around the 3rd century or could have lived even in the 4th and the 5th century. For the 5th century, we have the Achaemenid conquest of Darius I. So, he must have lived during that time, roughly 2300 to 2500 years from the current day where we live. So, there is one line that goes in one of the reliefs which says Bhagavato Shaki Munino Buddho. So, he is regarded as Bhagavato, one who is blessed with knowledge, Shaka Munino Buddho, the one who is the Muni of the Shakyas. So, this is the inscription that you see. But there is this full account given by Aitsing Hyunzang, whom we call, around the 673 CE, which is around 1500 years before. He mentions of an author called Ashwaghosha, whose work called Buddha Charitram is very famous. So, there is a mention of Ashwaghosha's Buddha Charitram in a foreigner, a Chinese traveler's account. And this Buddha Charitra Kavya, which is Buddha Charitram by Ashwaghosha, which is roughly dated to about 1st century or 2nd century CE, roughly 1900 years before, talks about the birth and the life of Buddha. Here there is one shloka that I would want to quote from Buddha Charitram. Uror yathorvasya pruthoscha hastan mandhatur indra pratimasya murdhnaha. Uror yathorvasya. The birth of a rishi called Orva was given because he is said to have born from the thigh. Uru is the thigh. Since he was born from Uru, he was called Orva. And then of Prithu from the hand, Pruthoscha Hastan. In Srimad Bhagavata Mahapuranam, we deal with Venaraja who was dead and his hands were churned to get Prithu Maharaja. Mandhatur Indra Pratimasya Murdhanaha. The one who was the peer of Indra called Mandhata was born from the head, Murdhni. Kakshau Vataschaiva Bhujan Sadeshat. So, Kakshivat was born from the armpit. Similarly, was the birth. This is divine, right? It is not understood by most of us who believe in medical science, who believe that a child has to be born from the mother's womb, the uterus. So, these accounts of the births of such people falls under divinity. So, there was this divine person's birth as well, is what Ashwaghosha indicates that of Buddha, like how these divine people were born, Orva, Kakshivat, Mandhata, Prithu and so on. So is his birth, Buddha's birth. So, the Buddhist tradition regard Lumbini, which is in the present day Nepal, as the birthplace of Buddha and largely regard Kapilavastu as the place where he grew up. Now, here is the brief history of Buddha's birth. Maya Devi, so Sudodhana's wife, was a Kolian princess, and one day she dreamt. You must see many reliefs in the earlier course of Bhāratiya Sāra Bodhani level 1 while discussing Indian architecture. I have made a mention of how Buddha's birth took place. So there are many relief panels that explain about an elephant coming from the heavens and moving towards the womb of Maya Devi. So this is indicative of Buddha's birth, because she dreamt of seeing the white elephant Airavata seated upon which was Indra, that elephant coming towards her womb in the night. And then it is believed that this was a divine birth. So she dreamt of a white elephant with 6 white tusks coming onto her right side. And 10 months later, it is said that she gave birth to Siddhartha. And she left to her father's place from Kapilavastu to her father's place, and on that way, while she got labor pain, she had to deliver at a place called Lumbini. And it was below a Shala tree that Buddha was delivered, and true to his family name, which was called Gautama, he was called Gautama Siddhartha. It is said that there was a hermit called Asita who analyzed this newly born child and saw 32 marks in the body of the child of that of a great man, and said that this boy shall either rule the world by being an emperor or could become a great ascetic, a sannyasi. Kondanna, who was the first arhat to see Buddha, said that this child, Gautama Siddhartha, would eventually become Buddha. Please remember, Buddha Shabdam has been used in the erstwhile texts as well, much before Gautama Siddhartha, because it is a title given to a person with a certain set of beliefs. So here he left his palace. It is said that Gautama left his palace one day to see the outside world. He was a very pampered prince. He had never seen the adversities of life, and he was shocked upon encountering various sufferings. So he is said to have gone in a chariot with his friend and the charioteer Chandaka, and it is said that he saw loads of people gathered on either sides to see him, but he saw that there was some flaw in them or the other. He got down from his chariot and walked village after village to see one sight after the other that was more astonishing than the previous one. He saw a diseased man, a person who was suffering from a certain disease. He saw a decaying corpse, the corpse of a person. And he also saw a person who was crying, lamenting. And then he saw a person who was an ascetic, who was very non-committal to any expressions shown by him. So looking upon this, looking upon an old man, looking upon a man who was very sad, grieving, and then seeing a person who was affected by a disease, and seeing a decaying corpse, and then later an ascetic, he wanted to take up to the life of being an ascetic, where he would be detached from this mundane world. You can see that in this video link. It is a clip that we are going to show you from one of the videos available on Buddha's life in the open source.
What moment is that? Show me death.
As we have witnessed this clip, Buddha later became an ascetic, and this process of him leaving the family again is said to have a folklore around it. He went back to the palace with dejected thoughts, and there he saw women in the night lying in various compromising positions, and to his utter dismay and disbelief, he did not want to stay in this particular environ for more time, and he decided to leave the palace. He decided to leave his wife. He decided to leave his son. So his wife was Yashodhara, his son was Rahula. So he decided to leave all the comforts, his family, his wife, his children, and started moving into the forests. And there he is said to have obtained the monk's robes, and some say that he was blessed to receive the monk's robes. And then he became a monk. And until he attained Purna Samadhi and thereby Nirvana, he said he will not move out of the place, and he is said to have received his final Nirvana, Parinirvana and Samadhi and Purna Jnanam under the shade of a Bodhi tree. So he is called the Bodhisattva or a Sadhu in a place called Bodh Gaya in Bihar. Gaya Kshetram we call it today. And thereby, after receiving that enlightenment, he is said to have propagated 4 noble truths. It is called Chatvari Arya Satyani. In Pali, it is called Chattari Arya Chachani. So, these are the 4 noble truths that he propagated. The first one was Dukkham. He said, this existence itself is Dukkham. Whatever we are living now is Dukkham, is suffering. The next one was Samudaya. Samudaya deals with the Udaya, the arising, the origin of this Dukkham. So, first you have Dukkham, then you understand what is the origin of that particular Dukkham. Then he says, once you have understood that there is an origin to Dukkham, you will have to put an end to it, which is Nirodha or cessation of that particular Dukkham. Then he deals with the final one, Margam. Once you have understood there is a Dukkham, once you have understood there is an origin to the Dukkham and then a Nirodha, a cessation to the Dukkham, you understand the Margam to enlightenment. So, these are the 4 teachings that we know of. Then places like Sanchi, Saranath associated with Buddha's life, thereby teaching to these noble truths to the people, became very popular. Interestingly, Swami Vedanta Deshika, whom we have invoked in various occasions in both this course and the previous course, mentions of the tenets of Buddhism, Jainism, Charuvaka and so on in his book called as Paramata Bhangam. In that Paramata Bhangam, he says that Buddhism deals with 4 major principles. Sarvam Kshanikam Kshanikam. They believe largely in the philosophy of Kshanikavadam, which is momentary truth. For example, there is a candle and I have lighted the candle. So, at 5:30 p.m. I have lit the candle, there is light. So, I measure the length of that particular candle. 5:35, there is still light, but the length of the candle would have reduced. Say from x, it would have gone to x1. Then in 5:45 it would have further reduced to x2, the same light. Now, Buddhism asks a question. Have you seen a change in the candle? Yes, its height was reduced from x to x1 to x2. Has there been a reduction in the wick? Yes, if the length of the wick was say y, it has become y to y1 to y2. So, when the wax is melting, when the wick is getting burnt up, the light that you see, we say it is constant. No. So, as per the logic given by Buddhism and Buddhists, the light that you see every minute as the wax melts and as the wick goes down is also new light. So, every knowledge that arises every second is momentary in nature. It is kshanikam. It lasts for that moment only. So, the first principle was sarvam kshanikam kshanikam. Second one was sarvam dukkham dukkham. Third, sarvam swalakshanam swalakshanam, that which exhibits itself. Fourth, sarvam shunyam shunyam, that which is void. So, based on these 4 statements, they came up with 4 large principles, says Vedanta Deshika. Those doctrines were kshanabhangaha, which is kshanikavada, momentary in nature. Pratyakshartha bhangaha, those objects that I perceive. See, for example, if I see a mic in front of me, my eye is seeing. But pratyakshartha bhangaha, that is also momentary in nature. What you see, its impression lasts in your mind, whereas the object doesn't exist, is what Buddhism states. Pratyakshartha bhangaha. Next is bahyartha bhangaha, the external objects do not exist apart from knowledge. Then the fourth one is dharma dharmi bhava bhangaha. Dharma dharmi, apart from the dharmas, the attributes, there is no such object called dharmi, is what the fourth doctrine states. Now these four doctrines, the four statements, the four noble truths, based on that, there were two large sects called as Hinayana, which is the realistic path of Buddhism, and Mahāyana, which is the idealistic path of Buddhism. Again, this was further classified into four. How? So there was Vibhasa, the commentary on the Abhidhamma texts, the Dharma texts. So those people who accepted Vibhasa, those group of Buddhists were called Vaibhashikas. Those people who accepted certain doctrines of that particular Abhidhamma text, certain sutras of the Abhidhamma text were called Sautrantikas. So they believed in the commentary Vibhasa, they became Vaibhashikas. Only in certain aphorisms, doctrines, they became Sautrantikas. Then those people who combined with the belief in the Abhidhamma text also believed in Yoga Shastram as one of the most progressive ways of getting enlightenment were called Yogacharas. And then those set of people who did not want to be at extremes of the Abhidhamma text or yoga system were called Madhyamikas. So we had Vaibhashikas, Sautrantikas, Yogachara and Madhyamikas. These were the four classifications. Now whatever doctrines they say in detail, are there any counters to it, has been very answered in his own inimitable scholastic scholarly way by Vedanta Deshika in four different chapters, where he does Bahishkaram, where he critiques the four sects. As mentioned at the start of this course, I am not getting into critiquing or criticizing. These are the texts of Buddhism. Now, is there acceptance of Buddha? As mentioned earlier, Buddha is a title given to a person who believes in those tenets. So before Gautama Siddhartha, who is largely revered as the Buddha of the current day, there were many other Buddhas. Even during the times of Rāmāyana, in Ayodhya Kandam, there is a mention of the concept of Buddhism or a person who believes in such beliefs. Nindamyaham karma pituhu kritam ta. When Jabali propagates Lokayata Matam, stating that there is no use in believing that dharma will take us to Moksham Rama, just because you have given a promise to your father is dead, come back to Ayodhya, you don't have to keep up the words of your father. Who believes in all of this? While he gave such thought processes, there is this rebuttal given by Rama. Nindamyaham karma pituhu kritam tat tvam grihnad dvishamasta buddhim buddhyanayaivam vidhayacharantam sunastikam dharmapatada petam. Don't talk like a Buddhist, like a Nastika, says Rama to Jabali. So there is a mention of this word Buddha and the thought processes associated with Buddhism during Rāmāyana times itself. In Sri Mahābhāratam, we come across a Bhishmacharya who speaks about the various qualities, aspects, avatarams of the Lord in the presence of Krishna as an answer to Yudhishthira's questions. Kimekam daivatam loke kimbapyekam parayanam stuvantahkam kamarchantaha prapnayur manavaha shubham ko dharma sarva dharmanam bhavatah paramo matah kim japan muchyate jantur janma samsara bandhanat. To these 6 questions, Shat Prashni raised by Yudhishthira, the answers are given by Bhishmacharya in the form of a compilation, a compendium of 1000 names called Vishnu Sahasranamam. To that Vishnu Sahasranamam, there are many revered commentaries. Amongst the commentaries, one very deep, exquisite commentary is called Bhagavad Guna Darpanam by Parashara Bhatta, roughly 1000 years before. While commenting upon the names, he mentions of a set of certain names that denote Buddhavataram. I will read out 1 or 2 names from it. Durariha, in Durariha, which is Durarighne Namaha, here is his Sanskrit commentary. Idam daurlabhyam aprapitu supapa vishaye prayachannu buddhavataram niyachati. Further he says, Durmarga gamino durarinaha tan trayi margatyajan aditi staistat taptai tairushya hatavan iti. The one who has abandoned the noble path of preaching the doctrines as mentioned in the Vedas and takes up to Nastika Vadam and thereby confuses his followers further. Why does the Lord have to incarnate as Buddha and confuse his followers? So that they can take this up as a challenge, go back to the Vedas, give the right interpretation to it so that a Sattvika society can be born hence. So such a person who does that is called Durariha. Maya mohena te daityaha. There is a Vishnu Purana vachanam which Parashara Bhatta cites. Maya mohena te daityaha prakarair bahubhistada vyuthapita yathanaisham trayin kaschid arochayat hatashvate suradevai sanmarga paripanthinaha iti. So he talks about those people with demoniac thoughts who come and profess such aphorisms. So while mentioning in Vishnu Sahasranamam, this nama indicates Buddha. Then there are few other namas. Kritakarma, Kritagamaha. While mentioning Kritakarma, Kritakarmane Namaha and Kritagamaha, Kritagamaya Namaha, here is the commentary. Tad vipralipsaya swayam apyanushtita tadacharaha Kritakarma. Tat sthemne pranita buddharhatadi samayikagamaha Kritagamaha. So he talks about how Kritakarma or Kritagamaha is mentioned. Swayam apyanushtita tadacharaha. So whatever acharam he follows, he calls that as the way ahead. So these are the names indicative of Buddhavataram, which are not akin to or affiliated to Vedic thoughts, but the Lord incarnated so that the right interpretation for the Vedas when there was a lull period could be born. Now, there is this verse from the 11th, 12th century poet called Jayadeva, who again attributes Buddhavataram as one of the avatars of Lord Krishna. Nindasi yajna vidher ahaha shruti jatam sadaya hridaya darshita pashu ghatam keshavadhrita buddha sharira jaya jagadisha hare. When this person was born, he ridiculed and abhorred people from performing Vedic yajna, sacrifices. Nindasi yajna vidher ahaha shruti jatam, which was against the tenets of Vedas. Sadaya hridaya darshita pashu ghatam. He was unable to bear the animals that were being tortured and killed. So this from Jayadeva's Ashtapadi mentions of Buddhavataram. One of the mystic saints called the Alvars, who are said to have lived before the times of Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara was around the 8th and the 9th century. 7th, 8th and 9th century. Before that, 5th, 6th, 7th centuries, Alvar mentions of how the Lord incarnated to dupe his devotees. Kallavedattai kondu poi puram pukkavarum kalandasurarai ullam pedam sheidittu uyir unda upayangalum vellanir shadayanum ninnidai vetlamai vilanga nindradum ullamulak kudaindu en uyirai urukki unnume, he says. So there is a mention of Buddhavataram even in the Hindu text, so much so that it has also been accepted as one of the incarnations of Vishnu. In the 14th to 15th century time period, one of the great composers in the Telugu and Sanskrit language called Annamayya or Annamacharya, who lived in the Andhra, Telangana and Tamil Nadu regions, mentions Daruna Buddha Kaliki Dashavidha Avatara. While mentioning of the Dashavatarams of the Lord, Daruna Buddha Kaliki Dashavidha Avatara Sirapane Gosamane Sri Venkatagiri Kuta Nilaya, he says. Similarly, in the Kannada tradition of the Vagayakaras, we have Purandaradasa, who mentions about the Dashavataras. He begins with Makutakke Mangala, Machavatarakke, Mukhakke Mangala, Muddu Kurmage. He talks about the avatarams. He says, Uragalige Mangala Uttama Bauddhage Charanake Mangala Chaluva Kalkige. He mentions of Buddhavataram. Be it Purandaradasa of the Kannada tradition, Annamaya of the Telugu tradition, Alvars of the Tamil tradition, Jayadeva of the Odisha Bengal tradition, and Parashara Bhatta's commentary, they all mention of Buddhavataram as also one of the incarnations of the Lord. So, though Buddhist tenets have no relation to Sanatana Dharma, to a large extent its propagator Siddhartha Gautama and his previous Buddhas have been accepted into the fold of Sanatana Dharma. You may now see a few pictures of how a royal couple who visit Buddha. This comes from the Bharut Stupa of the Shunga dynasty in the early 2nd century BCE. You see another image of Buddha preaching in the Tushita heaven in Amaravati. This is the Satavahana period. This is the 2nd century CE. You can now see the Ishapura Buddha, one of the earliest depictions of Buddha of the 15th CE, in the 1st century AD, around that period. Saranatha standing Buddha of the 5th century CE, and the 6th century Gandhara Buddha of Afghanistan that you see.